Well, all right. Welcome to the Real Deal On. And today we have a very special guest, Amber Carlson. She's the president and CEO of Archway Learning Solutions, a corporate training development firm based in Orlando. At her core, Amber is a lifelong learner, passionately committed to continuous growth for herself and others, always striving to reach the highest potential. As an author of the best-selling book Ignite Your Legacy series on executive leadership development, Amber is on the profound journey of research and writing to support senior leaders in their pursuit of growth, resilience, and personal success. A breast cancer survivor and mother of two, Amber understands the delicate balance between personal and the professional life, and lives by the motto: work hard, play hard, and rest well. In her downtime, Amber enjoys reading historical fiction, exploring new cities and flavors, attempting to be an artist, chasing waves with her kiddos, and attending as many rock concerts as possible. Welcome, Amber Carlson!
Thank you so much. What an intro.
Yes, we have to make it fun, don't we?
Very fun.
And we got to add a little flair of rock. So I had to,
Always.
just a touch. So, thank you so much for sharing your most valuable asset, your time, your energy, your wisdom, and it is so appreciated. And before we dive deep into who you are as a person, let's get a high level on where you are right now so that we could add some context and flavor to, what the light at the end of the tunnel of some of the challenges we all face, and it's really helpful to have that context to know, wow, okay, wow, you could still have this incredible life even though we have been down some interesting roads.
Oh, certainly. So where I am now is at a kind of a turning point, a chapter change in my life. So definitely a transition and growth. So my company I've had now for almost 8 years. It continues to grow and is very exciting. Certainly earned our my business owner entrepreneur card recently. So had some trials and it dipped down and now it's back up again, just as it does.
Hmm.
But it's going well. I'm opening a second business later this year that I've been working on for the last several years, finally ready to launch. So that'll be coming. I have my best-selling book that's come out. The second one will be coming out next year. So all of these different things I've just been work, and focused on are coming to fruition. And it's such an exciting thing. It's wonderful to see all the time and energy turning into something, especially that's useful for other people. So
Absolutely.
that's where I am currently, but definitely it's in a turning of the page time in my life.
Once we could grasp that we are writing our own story and start taking control and really be intentional about what it is we're going to be creating, it's so powerful.
Mhm.
So, were you always an entrepreneur? Did you have a job, a W-2, or have you been entrepreneuring it the whole time?
I have definitely had a job. My first job actually was working at Jurassic Park here in Orlando. So that was a lot of fun as a teenager. But when I started to get a little more serious, I did some teaching overseas and then came back here and ended up getting into the corporate world in sales and then moved into a training position in that space. And I worked at that company for 15 years.
Wow.
So in corporate America for quite a long time and was able to sit at the table with our senior leaders. I mean, we had 80,000 associates at one point. So it was a large organization and I kind of navigated through that. But what then turned me into the entrepreneur was the glass ceiling. I wasn't able
Mm.
to grow in that role at that company unless I moved and I couldn't do that. So I said, well, I'm a facilitator of learning and knowledge and designer of instruction and curriculum. Any company could use that. And so that's kind of the foundation of what inspired me to start my own business and organizational development.
And how long ago was that?
So almost 8 years this May.
Okay.
Years. Mhm.
So when we're making that shift from a corporate to just going off on our own, that certainly creates a lot of uncertainty.
Yes.
Having the right mindset, the belief in yourself, the belief in your products, the belief in all of the things that we need to have that. I mean, the most important thing we have is our mindset and our belief and our faith and all of that. Um, and that's like the worst time for there to be any turmoil in life. But it seems I'm just going out on a limb here because I know you've had quite the ride. It seems like to always happen kind of in the middle of those other transitions as well, which adds a dynamic. Was that the case for you? Were multiple moments of uncertainty available to you at the same time?
Absolutely. And I kind of look back to the hardest thing that I have gone through was losing my mom. She passed away in 2014. And that was when that was in February, and my son was born in September. So I became a new mother after having lost my own mother. I became a very different person in that experience. So before that, I was much more ruled by my emotions. I was much more fearful of really just allowing myself to fully feel an emotion because of either the shame of that, like you're being emotional, or I didn't want to um, have other people feel like they were being manipulated. But then when I lost her, I completely changed, and to the point where one of my coworkers asked me, Amber, do you on purpose always try to find the good in any situation? And I said, yes. I was kind of driving him crazy because he would bring up something that was bumming him out. And I'm like, all right, what can we learn from this? He's like, no, just let me roll in my feelings about it for a minute. But it really forced me to realize that, as you said, we are the author of our own story, and it changed me quite a bit. And so I started my business a few years after that. And then it just continued this cascade of one thing after another that kept happening while growing the business, not to mention COVID being thrown in the middle of that, like everyone else had to go through.
Well, and a new parent.
Yeah, I was a new parent. And then I was the caregiver to my two grandparents because my mom was an only child and I am an only child. So I'm taking care of at this point two 80-year-olds and managing their physical and financial and everything that they needed. Um, and that was quite the challenge. Then my daughter came, and that's when I started my business while I was on maternity leave because I couldn't travel 3 weeks a month with a 2-year-old and a newborn. And also, as I said, I didn't have the opportunity to grow. But then, as the years go by, a couple of years later, my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Um, then he had several issues at his work, which ended in him having to, because he also was an entrepreneur, he had to sell his properties. Then my grandparents passed away. Then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I mean, it's just like 1-2 punches all
Yeah.
throughout it. But all the while, I held on to what I had learned from losing my mom, that I'm going to find a lesson. But I do this a little differently. Some people say, what's the silver lining or what can I learn? I think about it, I kind of call it like pain to purpose.
Hmm.
So if you think about is if this pain were my teacher, what lesson would it want me to pass on to someone else? That's kind of how I think about it. If this
Hmm.
situation is supposed to teach me something, what will it teach me that I can then share? I think a lot of people don't consider the sharing part of that. They think, okay, what can I learn? How can I be better? How can I grow? But when we think about what we're passing on and teaching to other people, like for example, what am I teaching my kids as I go through this?
Hmm.
When we think about that, it shifts our focus. It makes it less about woe is me and more about what can I bring. So that's kind of been the
That's
the
beautiful.
continuous stream of issues.
And that's really powerful because I'm sure you've seen it, and my hallucination is from knowing you that you probably didn't ever have these moments, but there are secondary and tertiary rewards to being a victim. There are
Mm,
people who actually get their love from having all their problems. And there are some even that do not, because of where they're at, don't appreciate when someone is like, to your point, like, are you always this happy? Like, why, like, why
Right.
aren't you miserable like me? Like, and they want almost someone to be miserable, because then, it's the old saying, misery loves company. Uh,
Right.
but the truth is, so does success, so does happiness, so does love, so does gratitude. And they're so polarizing that oftentimes the person who's in that space of gratitude and love and looking for ways to use this to serve others, other people are like, jerk,
Mm-hmm.
like, why, why, like, you can't do that. Or we make it, we meaning people who are doing that, make it look easy. And then because I mean, you just shared, you've been doing it. It's been like your defining kind of principle, your guiding principle. So other people can oftentimes not get how to do that. And that's kind of the purpose of this conversation ultimately, is to show a light, to your point, turning your pain into purpose, and showing others how to do the same. So while it's simple, not easy to be positive and look for ways and how can I use this to bring value, have there been times when you didn't feel like that? You didn't feel like, I mean, sharing a positive message, and you wanted to just have a case of the F-its. And what did you do to overcome that?
So absolutely yes. And I think that's a healthy thing to do. It's healthy to say, you know what, today, no, I'm just gonna feel what I feel, and I'm gonna be in that space, but I'm giving myself space to do that. And I'm not editing myself, I'm not shaming myself, I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel this way. You're feeling it, so feel it. It's okay. But be able to identify it, name it, see what it's doing to your body, see how you can pivot and grow from it and heal yourself. That ability to do that is one of the hardest things. I think that it is really what maturity is our ability to heal ourselves,
Mhm.
and to take ownership of our own emotions and our reactions and so on. But sure, I definitely like get frustrated and sometimes get really sad, and I just allow myself that space. It's not something that I'm doing every day, um, but it definitely, when that wave hits, I have learned to be aware of that and to step back from what I'm doing, to give myself that time.
Yeah. And where did you learn this? Just on your own, or were you like a student of some other kind of practice? Is it based in faith? Is it based in, just knowledge, or just trial and error?
So I think it's a combination of those things. I had been going to see a therapist also for many years. The problem with that, though, is all the different therapists that I would see would say, Amber, you're doing so great. You think about things so great. You're really just on the right track. And they would literally say, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm like, well, great. So I would end up being my own therapist in our sessions. I would say, like, I'm aware of this and this is in my way and I'm working on that,
And if I were to
until,
therapize myself, I might tell
yeah,
myself to do.
that's the problem. I've studied cognitive behavioral therapy. So the
Mhm.
problem with knowing that and then having that therapist there is you can kind of become your own sounding board there. But until recently, I had a different therapist that really opened my eyes to things I had not seen. And she did that expertly through the way she asked questions, but she inserted her ideas. And one of them was about peace, because I was telling her a struggle that I have and I continue to have and work through all the time is I feel like a tightness, a pressure here, that stress really.
Mhm.
And I have to really work on how do I release that. And I was talking with her and she said, well, where are you physically when you do feel that release? Where are you? And so I started listing my favorite places. Like I'm sitting at the beach looking out at the waves. I'm in the mountains, looking at like a far distance of the different the trees and the rolling hills. Or something as simple as I'm laying in my hammock in my backyard looking up at the sky and at the lake. And so what she told me is what brings me peace is actually openness. That here we are as humans in our boxes of wherever it is that we work all day long, and we are not in an open space. So when she said that to me, this huge light bulb went off in my head. And so my children and I now are very intentional with getting out into openness. And we've actually started something that we call sky time. So instead of screen time, we have sky
Mm,
time. So we
love
go
it.
outside every day on purpose and have sky time, rain or not. We're going to get out there and have some sky time. And they love it. And they're 8 and 10 years old. And so we talk about the importance of getting out and doing that. That has brought me so much peace. So even though there are those struggles and times that even, every day there's some kind of challenge that comes up, having found this way to reconnect with my peace has been a huge game changer for me.
And I hallucinate. Um, Imagine maybe you're starting to feel that on a plane,
Mhm.
feeling that pressure coming in on your chest. Maybe you're starting to, and in order to do that, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and wonder if maybe in order to experience that, one would have to start putting images in their head about what's coming up, the event, the whatever, all the things that have to be done, and then all of the world starts collapsing in, and you start feeling even more of that pressure. And in that moment, you're on the plane. It's certainly possible you could just close your eyes and visualize and breathe in and just put your consciousness on that hammock or in the beach, or and you could even do that with your kids. You could just even talk about that and just, okay guys, we're gonna close. We're not outside now, we don't have our sky time now, but we can have it in our mind and recreate it in that moment. Because I mean, sometimes you don't have the beach in front of you, or
Mhm.
the openness that you would, in the ideal situation, have access to. So, have you practiced anything like that? And as I'm thinking of people who are going, well, that's nice, Amber, but I don't live near the ocean or the water, and I'm in my cubicle. What am I going to do now?
Mhm. So in that case, I agree that you can visualize it, but that to me isn't the same.
No, of
I
course.
would rather think about when I will have the sky time and remind myself that it's coming,
Okay.
and and anticipate, okay, I'm getting off work at 5 o'clock. I'm going to go for a walk. Instead of immediately going to my car, I'm going to go for a walk 10 minutes and get some sky time before I head home. Or I'll get home first and go out on the porch before I do anything and breathe in. But what I would do if I were on a plane and was starting to feel kind of that freak out moment, or maybe you're in your office and you are in the cubicle and someone comes over and just pushes that button that certain way and you're just getting frustrated. In that case, I would do something completely different, which I suppose you could call it grounding. Whether you're in a plane or not, it's really, the idea of it is grounding. It's much more physical. So you put your feet on the ground. So I don't know about you, but under my desk, I have something I put my feet up on just to help like with circulation and so
Hmm.
on. But that won't work here. You have to put your feet down on the ground, and then you hold your hands as tight as you can at your side and just squeeze as hard as you can. Do the same thing with all your muscles in your legs, but you keep your feet on the ground. And then you breathe in and you're kind of tightening everything that you possibly can, and then you let it go.
Hmm.
And I'll do that like 3 or 4 times. And what's interesting about that is you're actually changing the blood flow all throughout your entire body. You're focusing so much of your energy on doing this action that the thing that was frustrating you, overwhelming you, making you freak out kind of takes a little back seat.
Hmm.
It slows down. It gives you that moment to process. And that what I like about that is it follows this other thing that I do. It's the third thought rule, if you will. Our first thought when we're approached with something that's frustrating or overwhelming, our first thought is usually in our instinctual, our
Hmm.
animal brain, right? Fear, panic, anger, whatever that is. That's our first thought. Then the second one usually is habitual, something we've trained ourselves to think. Maybe it's self-doubt, or maybe we're spiraling in some way. But if we train ourselves to do that grounding and look for the third thought typically is about curiosity. It's, well, why is that? Or maybe it's more constructive. I could do this instead, or that person's not important. So we get to that third thought. If we make space for that, if we're seeking that out, we say, okay, first thought, I'm pissed off at this person. Second thought is they're always doing this to me and I'm never going to get away from this situation. The third thought is, well, what can I do about it? And so making the space for that too, I find to be really helpful. But grounding is what I would do if I were in that moment where I literally just couldn't have that open release and that peace that I would want.
Love it. I do the tensing up when we do hypnosis sessions. I have people do that for the very same reason, to kind of just get really present yet dissociate at the same time, and then it does create a flow in their homeostasis where they're just able to relax because they have that contrast. And it was interesting that you shared about the anticipation in, I don't know if you knew this, but like when someone is struggling with drugs and alcohol, someone who would be quote addicted, do you know when they get the most high?
I would think it's when they are thinking about when they're going to
Yeah.
have their next bump
Yeah,
or
it's
whatever
it's
it
the
may be.
anticipation. So what you're doing is creating the dopamine
Hmm.
and taking the edge off simply by the anticipation. And yet, by doing so, you're still visualizing.
Hmm.
It may be
Absolutely.
temporally a little bit different. You may not be presently in it, but you're still you're changing your focus off of the problem and now into where what's next, which then gives you that all the neurotransmitters that are necessary for us to, kind of regulate our emotions in the first place. So brilliant. Love it. So, which brings me to another thought, because being that we are in relationships with all sorts of different people.
Hmm.
Um, of course, the most profound are usually with ourself and God, and then our spouses and children and so forth. What I found for myself, and I don't know if this is an experience you've had or anyone tuning in here, is I can handle most stressful situations when it comes to dealing with an associate, a business situation, a stressor just in the outside world, whatever. There's plenty of evidences of wackiness going on in the world where I found it to be the most challenging to navigate are with loved ones. So whether it's, with me, it'll be with like Heidi or my daughter, with Ellie, if we have a spirited debate, which is rare, but when it happens, it really throws me off for a moment. Um, is that a similar situation you've had? Because I mean, you shared, obviously, you shared your now ex-husband having some health challenges as well, and all of the things that wrap around that, and the kids. How did you navigate that separation of knowing that our personal comes into our professional, but you're busy building a business while at the same time you're dealing with the emotions of the people we are the closest to, which adds more fuel to that proverbial fire?
Well, how I did it was not a good way. How I did it. So I sacrificed my own on myself. So I would focus on work, work, work. And when I was done with work, I would focus, on my kids. And I homeschooled them during COVID while also growing my business. So that kind of balancing act was pretty crazy. So it was either one or the other that had my full attention. And then, of course, whatever was needed within the house, cleaning, cooking, whatever it is my husband needed at the time in support of his business, we would work on those things together. But I never did anything for myself.
Mm.
And that's the one thing that all those therapists kept pointing out to me, like, Amber, you need to make time for yourself. You need to do the things that you want to do, which is why I share that I attempt to be an artist, because if I put more attention to it, I think that I would grow in that area. I just don't do that enough.
Is that
And
something you want
that's,
to do?
oh, it is. And it's something that I now do more of.
And when you
I've
say
made
art, what
more
kind of art?
space. Acrylic painting.
Okay.
I really like to do that. And then there's this other kind of painting called collage painting, which instead of using paint on a canvas, you dye paper and tear the paper in a certain way that's the shape that you're looking for and glue that on. It's really cool and
Hmm.
fascinating the way it can look. So I enjoy that too. Um, so those kinds of things also bring me peace because I get out of my head and I
Mm-hmm.
start to just create and go with a flow essentially of whatever it is that, whatever direction it's taking me. And I also remove the self-critic when I'm in that space. I'm just making something. Maybe I love it, maybe I don't. I could paint over it.
Well,
So I
it's so
think
interesting with art how you can, go down those two paths because there's nothing really attached to it, so you can dissociate and allow the critic to just not be present for the moment, and then because you can, just start over, whatever, big deal.
yeah, and the critic is often rooted in our own fear of other people not appreciating whatever it
Hmm.
is. Like this isn't good enough, this isn't pretty enough, it's not real enough. People won't get it, people won't like it. Oftentimes our critic is rooted there. But David Bowie, who I absolutely love, talked about to be an artist truly, when you make your art for someone else, it will be your worst work. When
Hmm.
you make your art for yourself, that is your best that you can give. And I absolutely love that idea. And when I heard that there on an interview I saw of him, oh, I need to remind myself of that whenever I'm creating anything. I'm in that creative space making it for me.
Well, and in so many places that I've seen similar when speaking to artists, the and having been one myself in the music industry in my earlier career, it was interesting how so many of them were like, yeah, we just, write for the garbage. Where meaning we're not attached to it. We're just being present. And, it's like, okay, this is either going to be great or not, but we're just going to be in the moment. And that's why co-writing, from a music perception is also so fun because when people are totally present with each other, it's amazing what kind of like instinctual magic happens because we're just present. We're not worried about it. We're not like, thinking it's got to be the next opus or what have you. It's just being like, let's have a great time. And that's what, from a artistry position, like as you're painting, I'm guessing that there's an element of play with yourself almost like you're just kind of having fun like oh like you're allowing your mind to wander into different things. I wonder what would happen if I did this, and if it doesn't work, who cares? Like, there's
Right.
no one sees it yet. No one has, like. Now, do you do this with your children? Do you guys do art together?
We do. So I have my dining table is not my dining table. It's my art table, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my easel there, and then they each have their own easel on either side of me. And so we'll sit and do things. One really fun project we did recently is I had them paint each other's portrait,
And how old
and
are they?
they 8 and 10, and they did
Okay.
a surprisingly decent job. It was meant to be like a funny thing
Mm-hmm.
that just try your best, but it's going to be kind of funny because it's just for fun, and do your give it a shot. And they both did pretty well. But what continues to amaze me is my daughter has the eye. Like I'll see her whatever she creates, that it's just that whoa kind of next level. And my
Mm-hmm.
son is a lot more like me. He makes things from what he's been familiar with, and it's cute and good, but my daughter's stuff is just that. Hold on a second. So I'm keeping all of her things because I see some big potential
Okay.
in her
And is she the
direction.
oldest or youngest?
She's the youngest. My son's
Okay.
more the writer. She's
Uh-huh.
more the artist.
Okay. And how was it dealing with all of the things that you were doing, just kind of overcoming, breaking through to, you know, peace and sanity and all of that? How did you navigate those thoughts of like, okay, they're seeing what I'm doing right now and they're picking something up here. Like how often did you spend sort of not being the critic, but monitoring and being aware of how those patterns are being essentially exposed to them, whether we
Mhm.
realize it or not, right? They're the
Right.
patterns that we just run.
I
What
am
was that
very
experience like?
hyper aware of that. And I actually openly talk to them about it. So for me, my physical space really impacts my mind. So if there's chaos everywhere, it's overwhelming to me. And, they're kids. So they're playing with
There's chaos
hundred
everywhere all the
thousand
time. Yeah.
things. And they brought out that board game and this board game and Play-Doh's over there. And so I have learned that rather than kind of fussing at them, clean this up, this is too messy kind of thing, I'll just say, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Let's clean this up together.
Hmm.
And they have now what's really cool is now when they are feeling that overwhelmed feeling, like too much is going on or chaos, then they'll just say, Mommy, I feel overwhelmed right now. I need a little time. And I'll say, great, go lay on my bed or go lay on your bed and just take a few minutes and then come back when you feel better, when you feel ready to talk or whatever it is that we're doing. And to me, that's helped me so much just to say out loud, I am feeling this way. And
Hmm.
the idea of this actually came from an anger management book for kids, because I had noticed that my son was struggling with that, which I also have. And we did an exercise when he was in kindergarten. We did an exercise on draw a picture of your anger and give it a name. So I drew, it's kind of like those beakers that you see in like in a chemistry lab,
Hmm.
it looks like a beakers. Her name's Mrs. Bubbles. And I can take it up to a
She's
certain
married.
point. Huh?
She's
Well,
married.
she is.
Okay.
She was.
Okay.
So Mrs. Bubbles. So I could take it up to a certain line, but once that threshold is passed, then right.
Mm.
So that was what my anger looked like. And then my son drew essentially what you would imagine to be like a rock golem,
Mm.
kind of this anthropomorphized walking around rock. And he called him Rocky, appropriate for a kindergartner. And he said when he feels angry, he falls apart
Hmm.
and the rock just breaks all over the place and falls down. And so that exercise alone, that one, it was the very first exercise in the book, that one alone completely changed my awareness that it's okay to talk to them about my feelings. Like, I'm a little sad today. In February, when it was the anniversary of my mom's passing, I said, I really miss my mom today. I'm really sad today, and talk to them about it. And then I turned it into let's remember her and told them
Hmm.
stories and all of that, which turned it into a positive. But I just let them know I'm feeling this because I want them to know it's okay to feel whatever it is, but also to take responsibility for how we behave.
That is such an amazing gift to provide your children, because one of the things that we weren't really taught growing up, most people, is emotional intelligence and just being aware. And we see it now. And I mean, not to go down a dark road of like society today, but what you shared earlier, this living off of my feelings. Well, you can't really survive just being, impetuously emotional, and whenever a thing happens, overreact, and then, then what? And to be able to recognize, oh, okay, I'm feeling a certain way, and teach them that, okay, it's okay to have whatever. And this is not just for, obviously, for kids. Everybody needs to know that it's okay to experience what you're experiencing, and then ask yourself, is this serving? Like, is anger right now going to serve me? And most of the time, it doesn't. So then it's like, okay, well, it's a sign for me to change. It's a sign for me to make an adjustment. And then, what do I need to be experiencing right now? What emotion is going to be the most supportive on this next step, this next decision, the next what have you? Um,
I'd like to
so,
add to that because what my father taught me is compartmentalizing. So I also think like when you're in that moment, maybe so if we kind of the idea of being on the plane, maybe you're in a situation where you have a strong emotion, but you do not need to be acting on it right now. It would be inappropriate to do that. And maybe it's something that could get in your way of some kind of success as well. If it's at work or in your relationship or something, it could get in your way. So you don't have to suppress it. You just set it aside for a few minutes. Set it aside. And what my father said, compartmentalize it. Put it over here. Focus on what you need to in that moment to execute on whatever it is so you can bring excellence for whatever that is. Then when that's done and it's more appropriate time, come back to that and
mhm.
see, okay, I'm really upset about what that person had said, or I'm really hurt by it. To me, that is what real resilience is. Resilience often, it's that buzzword, you're resilient, stiff upper lip, kind of thing. To me, resilience can very quickly turn into a mask and a
Mhm.
facade. So if we instead say, I'm going to deal with this, I'm just not this second. I'm going to be the owner
Mhm.
of when I'm going to deal with whatever I'm feeling here. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to finish what it is that I'm doing and do that well. And then come back over here and say, how do I really feel about all that?
Right, because making a decision about how you feel about it while you're feeling it
Yeah.
kind of creates an issue, as it were.
You can. That's the three thoughts, right?
Yep.
So in that moment, if you're going to allow yourself to go down that path, then the first one is probably not serving. The second one is also not serving, but that third one, okay, now I'm on the right path.
Getting closer. Yeah, we at the treatment center when Heidi and I we ran a bunch of treatment centers down here. That's how we ended up in Florida. Is is always like the asking at least 3 to 5 times
Mhm.
because yeah, the first few are not going to be where the person really is, what they really want, and by taking that break, however one does that, it's similar to anything like people who like shopaholics, right? Someone who's just always buying stuff. I always work with them in say, okay, so you want that, wait a day. If you still want it tomorrow and you could still justify to yourself the purpose behind it and all of that, that's usually going to be at least a better decision. What usually happens is after that day, like, yeah, you know what, I thought about it. I don't really need that. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't need that 12th pair of, the 12th jacket or bag or sunglasses or whatever. Um, but it's hard when we've been so trained to instant gratification and instant results and so forth. And that happens even the the blessing and curse of the technology. So with the training and the teaching, like even like AI is such a great example how quickly that learns. And yet I'm sure you've experienced this in training and working with your children and all of that, that sometimes they don't get it immediately.
Oh, absolutely. I think no one does. You have to have the experience and go through the process. And wouldn't it be nice if we could push a button and be able to do whatever it is? Like, I really wish I could do that so I could play the guitar. But no, I have to practice. I have to learn the chords and I have to do the chord progressions and I have to do, exercises and so on. Same with learning another language. I would love to be able to push a button and all of a sudden speak Mandarin fluently. Well, that doesn't happen. We have to go through the process because what we're actually doing is creating new neurons in our brain. We're
Hmm.
creating muscle memory in our fingers. And that only comes through practice and going through the process. And I think this is one of the issues actually that we see in leadership today is that people go and they learn about leadership in school and then they get into a role where they are a leader, but they have not yet had that experience. So
Hmm.
they're still learning, right, how to really deliver on those theories and concepts that they understood with humans. And humans are unpredictable
Yeah.
and can change. And if a new opportunity arises and it is more suited to them, then they will leave. And that experience is what helps that leader really know what it means to motivate, inspire, increase someone's commitment to an organization only through experience, or to say goodbye and let them move on.
And one of the things that amazing leaders at least understand is failure is part of the process. And a fantastic leader is going to allow the people they're, leading or working with to fail. Because and we even with our kids we see that, right? Great leadership is allowing our kids to make a mistake so they learn the lesson. If we are constantly we're micromanaging from a leadership perspective personally or professionally, we're preventing the necessary learning for the people we're leading, and that ultimately is it's not leadership, but it's also the least loving thing that we could do, even though it appears to be loving to shield someone from making that mistake or what have you. And obviously when we get to serious issues, we want to prevent it, like don't run out in the street, but you know, don't run down that thing with your shoes untied. Hey, your shoes untied. Nope, still running. You're gonna learn pretty quick. Oh, I should probably not just I should stop and tie the shoe. Or obviously that's a very basic example, but how have you navigated that experience, and most importantly for yourself, giving yourself permission to fail and that relationship with your inner critic?
So I love the idea of failing fast, frequently, and cheaply. Amy Edmondson, she is one of the foremost thought leaders on failure, talks about being intentional with how we fail, that we're going to on purpose say, I'm going to try this and I'm going to put these parameters around it. and I'm going to see how it goes. And if I fail, then now I have new data that will inform the next thing that I try.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the smartest ways to fail. Um, it's hard to do because no one wants to. And then from a research standpoint, no data is bad data, right?
Right.
Whether it's you succeeded or you failed, either way, it's an opportunity for you to make intentional changes the next thing you do. If it worked great, wonderful. How can I expand it? How can I duplicate it? How can I teach it to someone else? What can I do to make it even better? If it failed, great. How do I avoid that? Or
Mm-hmm.
what should I have done differently? But taking that experience and turning it into learning, turning it into growth. So the only way we grow is through failure. Every single time I try to do the G chord and stretch my fingers all the way across the neck of the guitar, it's hard. And
What kind of G chord are you doing?
well, maybe it's the wrong one.
Okay.
I don't know. My teacher taught me this one
I
that's
know,
like
just messing with
stretching
you.
me like crazy.
Yeah.
And my one finger gets on the wrong string and it
Mm-hmm.
sounds funky, and I just have to make myself do it again and again. And every time it doesn't sound right, it motivates me to want to, do those exercises. So we learn and grow only through failure. Only.
It's so interesting using guitar as an example. And all learning is based in failure, right? I mean, if we think about it, right, and we learned how to walk, but we failed at
Yeah.
it until we did it. But to keep our minds sharp, learning new skills, new things is so powerful. My dad is 82 or 83 or something, and he's taking guitar lessons now.
Awesome.
And I mean, he taught me guitar originally, like like two chords, a G chord, and a whatever, and a couple of riffs. But that was it. And then I took it to I ran with it for myself. But it's so funny how now that he's retired and he's like, what am I gonna do? Like sit at home and drink all day? Like I got to do something because he was still consulting. He didn't need to work, but he was consulting, and now it got so slow at the bank that he's like they didn't have anything for me to work on anymore. So they're like, okay, we're just maybe we'll do some one-offs, but we don't have any deal flow like we used to. So he's like, all right, I'm just gonna start playing guitar, and he shares the frustration to like kind of what you shared about just kind of learning the scales and learning the rhythms and so forth, but it does keep him sharp. And I'm sure the thing to remember is that experience with failure. So how do you transmit that experience to your children and to people you work with and so forth? How do you give them permission to fail?
Well, the first thing I'd say is the keeping sharp is absolutely true. There's tons of science that talks about as we get older, even what the age we are now, but especially when you're in your 70s, 80s, and so on, to learn a new thing impacts your hippocampus, which is where new neurons are created. And when you fail at that, you are exercising your brain, which it really does have an offset to possible dementia. So my foundation is working it with older adults, folks that have those diagnoses. So I have been around a lot of different people who have educated on that, the Alzheimer's Association being one of them. And learning those things really does make a huge difference. The sharpness is real.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that, also motivates me to want to continue to learn, to read the music of the guitar, to really learn every single thing about it, even though it's challenging. So how do I talk about failure in my workspace? So when I'm working with my team on something, or I'm working with a client on something, I really like what Amy talks about is we put those parameters around a project. This is something we're going to do and try. Now, in the world of training, the only way that training is impactful is if you see a measurable change.
Mm-hmm.
But we also know that we won't be able to see if that change happens until we do the training. So we create it with our, the best intentions, following all the proper instructional design, understanding what the stakeholders want, knowing what the subject matter experts talking about, what they should learn and know how to do. Then we do the training, measure if they understood it, gain that knowledge, and if they felt it was practical to them. But then whether or not they use it is a completely different story,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then that's where having leadership support comes in. So I always say It's all about can I, will I. Can you? Well, me as the facilitator, that's my job. My job is to teach you, to help you learn to the point where you can do this. You have the ability, knowledge, the skill set. Whether or not you will is up to you. And so when I think about failure, I like to put those guardrails on. We're going to deliver this training knowing that not everybody is going to do the thing we want them to do. How will we pivot? How will we iterate? And that comes from, again, gathering that data.
Hmm. It, one of the ways to also sometimes perceive that is if we can really anchor into someone, the only way to fail is by not trying.
True.
And now, if someone's really averse to failure, that the true failure is not even going for it. That the success is in the attempt, the success is in the action, and the outcome may or may not be desired, but the failure is not going for it.
Hmm.
It's so interesting how we all, grow up, and that's why I was asking also about your kids what our experience is with failure because a lot of times people don't go for things because they don't want to look bad. They don't want to fail. So, like I have my friend Tommy Lama, he says, he's never failed at polo because
Mm,
he's never attempted polo. So he has a perfect record.
okay.
So it's a joke, obviously,
Yes.
but oftentimes he's showing the ridiculousness of how some people actually do process where they won't go for it, and culturally, certainly corporately, failure has received a, unfortunately a bad rap because there are a lot of leaders that don't allow their teams to screw up. So they won't even bother going for it. So then they go, oh, see, I never failed.
Yeah,
Um,
good creating the space for that. Well,
yep.
when it comes to kids, Carol Dweck is an amazing author.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote about the growth mindset. There's
Yep.
tons of research that she's done with children in shifting their thinking to remove the fear of failure and focusing on that growth. So my kids and I talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have kind of two different ways you can think about something. So if, for example, and both of them are very hard on themselves, just like I was when I was their age. Uh, so they, if they're doing a math problem and they get it wrong, and I see that it's not quite right or something was missed, and I point it out to them, then they'll get frustrated that they made a mistake. And so then that's a moment where we then say, okay, there's two different ways we can look at this. We can either say, I'm not smart, I screwed up, or now I can fix it and I can learn, and kind of shifting that. And in the moment, again, it's those three thoughts. The first thought is, I'm so upset. And then the second is, oh, I shouldn't feel so upset. So I don't talk to them about the three thoughts, but I help them work through it and give them
Mm-hmm.
that space and step away. I'll point it out and say, okay, there's ways we can think about it. And then I back off and give them their own room to think about it and think it through and process that feeling. Then, my son will get upset and he'll erase it and then he'll redo it and he'll rework it and then he'll see the thing that he missed and fix it. And then after a little time's gone by, I'll come and I'll touch base with him and ask him, how are you feeling about it now? Oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
fine. Right. That's the response I get after
Yep.
giving him that space. I'm good. And do you think that, the next time that you have that problem, you'll remember to do whatever it was? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll be fine. Great. Okay. So you learned that. Wonderful.
There you
But
go. And
I
how
agree.
rewarding.
Teaching kids to process failure is very hard to do.
Because so much of our identity is rooted in that.
Mhm.
And like you even said it earlier, like, oh, I like if oh, but that thought, I'm not a smart person. And that's an identity statement. That's
Right.
not like I was behaving not smartly or I was in a not smart state. It's I'm not smart, which is a much more challenging
Mhm.
shift is changing an identity versus a behavior or an action. Um, it's funny. I it reminded me of our daughter at I guess she's probably 4 or 5 ish, and she has time limits on her screen time. Like it's hard to. I mean, it's a tough balance, right? Because it's in the world. She doesn't have understanding or mastery of it. I know the biggest challenge I had, with technology at first was my initial resistance to it in the music industry. And when we shifted from tape to Pro Tools and all that stuff, the people who wouldn't adapt, they died So his
Mhm.
adapt or die, and the ones who were super quick excelled. So I was like, all right, she's got to have a thing of technology, but I also obviously want her to, we want her to be not addicted to it. So it's time, okay, time to take away your iPad. No more screen time, and she freaks out, and then stopped, and then she was fine, and I was like, okay. And a couple hours later, comes back, and she's goes like, oh, how you doing, honey? Good. You notice I'm not upset anymore about, you not having the iPad? I was like, yeah, yeah, I did. That's great. You want to know what I did? I was like, well, of course, honey. What'd you do? Well, I just sat down and I imagined that I had my iPad and I just sat and pretended I was playing the game that I wanted to play. And like it's such a weird thing, but it's like, okay, well that's certainly better than sitting there on it. You're using your
Yes.
imagination, you're finding ways that is such a beautiful gift and skill set that I was I wish you would have visualized something else, but at least it was using those skill sets that are really, really valuable and important, because if we don't have access to all of our resources and something gets taken away, we're now screwed.
Mhm.
So it's being having that flexibility and being kind of purpose driven. At that moment, her purpose was to distract herself with the tablet. Uh,
Mhm.
she didn't have it, so she distracted herself with the tablet in her mind. So she still got the same result. And I think that's where the permission to fail is so important, because it gives people the opportunity to try something. And also, it kind of cuts to in your trainings, in your family, in your personal life, do you have like your own mission, vision, and values sort of articulated? Do you, when you go into a company, or when you're talking with your kids and helping them kind of identify some of those borders, those guide rails that you're sharing earlier, do you use any of those as a tool or vehicle?
I do. So we have family rules is how
Hmm.
I've done that. And there's the three main ones. There's a few others, but the three are the big ones. And it's in order very intentionally. And if I ask them, they rattle them off. So the first one is to be safe. The second is to have fun. And the third is to learn something. And so these three are meant to teach them how to make decisions.
Hmm.
When they're looking at an opportunity, is it safe? Yes. Or, safe enough, right? Yes. If the answer is yes, cool. Then will it be fun? Okay. If it's also fun, you should go for it. Will you learn something makes it even better? But if the first thing is fun and it's not safe, right? Is it fun but not safe? Maybe you should skip it.
Hmm.
Maybe you shouldn't jump off the bridge just to see what happens. It might be fun for a
But we'll
moment.
learn something.
You definitely will learn something if you're around to still think about it.
Yeah.
So that's a very simplistic thing that I've taught my kids in having somewhat of a way to make a decision about their actions and how to prioritize things that are, important for their well-being. Now, as they get older and they want to experiment and try different things, certainly that's where the failure comes in. But it's to a degree that I hope, as any parent does, that they're still somewhat safe in what they're doing, because you don't want harm on your kids. But then again, you want them to walk that border, right? To
Hmm.
try those things that are a little bit different and out there and maybe not fully safe. So they can learn and grow. And like motorcycle is a perfect example. I don't like them, but if my kids want to try it, then they can do that, but through a way of doing it practically that will keep them from flying off on the road.
I have my motorcycle sitting in my garage, and I've not really ridden since our daughter was born. But she sees it and she's like, "When can we go riding?" And then we're getting to that age, like, "Okay, you're big enough, you could hold on." I'm not, At some point, I was thinking getting a sidecar. I was like, "Oh, that'd be fun," but I don't know. It's
Well, just
one
this
of those things.
weekend, I was hanging out with a friend of mine, and he does motocross.
Mm.
And so he has three kids, two little boys and a little baby girl. She's not even one yet. And all three of his kids, he would wear a baby backpack and go on his motorbike and
Hmm.
pop wheelies and do all of it. He's done that with all
Love
three
it.
of them. And I saw that, this Saturday, that he's got his little girl on there and she's just bouncing around, having a great old time while he's popping wheelies with his son, also popping wheelies next to him.
Yeah.
So he has found a way to do something that he knows how to do, his ability, because he learned how to do it in a safe manner.
Mm-hmm.
But that others might think, "Ooh, that's kind of borderline in safety." But I thought it was awesome. His little girl was thrilled.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's such an interesting perspective, and this is where I think the longer term education and everything that we're talking about right now is giving people permission to also be themselves,
Hmm.
and celebrate what works, add what's missing, and call into the strengths. Because if everybody lived the exact same way, if everybody had the exact same values and rules and all of those things, the world would be very boring, and we wouldn't really progress. The progression and the changes and the exponential growth that we're experiencing in the last few hundred years is because there's been challenges
Hmm.
and questions like, how can I improve this? How can I make a difference? Or we talk about Edison failing to create the light bulb 1,000 times. So it's so important that we're able to, if we're looking to grow in any area of life, embracing the challenge and the opportunity for failure is tantamount to our success. Otherwise, we won't even try stuff.
It has to do with the outcome. We need to
Yeah.
separate ourselves from the ultimate outcome
Mm-hmm.
and truly just enjoy whatever it is that we're doing to get us there. And the enjoyment really is key. So even if it's a struggle, I'll give you an example. When I was writing my book, it took 2 years to write that sucker. And I met Francis Ford Coppola last year, and he was
Nice.
asked a question of, how do you know you're done with a project? And he said, when I absolutely hate it, I know I'm done and ready to move on to my next project. And that was true for me with writing my book. I got to the point where it's like, I am done looking at this. I have done everything I can. And it was, here and there a struggle with editing and making changes and, is this going to be right? And finally I just said, I'm done. It is what it is. I'm going to put it out in the world and people are going to love it. People are going to hate it. And I'm okay with that. I hope that they do, because they will then be making decisions for themselves on what they believe and what they would take away from it.
Yeah.
So it's letting go of that outcome and just enjoying what you're doing until, of course, you hate it. And then you have to move on.
There you go. So it's in that case, we're talking about somewhat, I don't say esoteric, but like taking thoughts and turning them into uh, an experience through the book, or through your art, or even through facilitation and everything we do. I mean, I would argue that we are, not to be trite or anything, but we are spiritual beings living a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
What is your relationship with that otherness, whatever language you may have for it? But when you're doing something like the writing, doing something, I mean, that's a spiritual, everything ultimately is a spiritual experience. So, from my perspective, anyway. So, what is, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. What is your relationship with that otherness, with the ether, the universe, the God, all of that? What is your relationship with that, and how do you lean into it, if at all?
So to me, the idea of God is love is what
Hmm.
resonates with me the most. And so I just go back to the Beatles. That's all we need, right?
Hmm.
All we need is that. And when I can show that to someone else without it being reciprocal, where
Hmm.
I can show love through just a kind word, through a smile, or maybe sitting next to them when they're upset. I think about my kids if they're struggling with something, and I can just be there and I don't have to do anything. I can just show them that I love them. So to me, ultimately, it is love
Hmm.
that is my connection to that universe. Because when we show that to each other, that's to me the most spiritual moment that
Hmm.
there can be. My undergraduate degree is in religious studies. And so through that, I attended an Orthodox synagogue for a year, every Shabbos.
Hmm.
I was kosher that year. The following year, I studied with Jain nuns and did very intense meditation throughout that year. Um, all different experiences. My family is a mix of Southern Baptist and Seventh Day Adventist. I thought very seriously about being a Wycliffe Bible translator at one point, which is a lifelong commitment. You go to a remote place that does not have a written language. You learn the language and you translate the Bible into it and teach it. I mean, it takes 25
Wow.
years to do. So I was very seriously considering doing that as well. But through all of those experiences and studying world religion and why people believe what they do, it exposed me to so many different thoughts. But ultimately, the common denominator was that genuine love of other people. That's the thing that
Hmm.
they all had in common. And they agreed and disagreed in several other areas, what to eat, how to dress, whatever. But ultimately, showing kindness first, showing genuine love and care, they all had in common. And so that is really what I took away from it.
It's so beautiful. And I use at our seminars, All You Need Is Love is one of the opening songs when we have everybody, you know, like the usually the second and third days, like now we all know each other, play that song and everyone's got to hug each other. So it's a big, you know, everyone's walking around and hugging each other to that song, which is beautiful. And I love the other thing that you just shared is the non-reciprocal love. The
Mm-hmm.
lack of an expectation, like, yeah, I gave to you, you give to me. Like it's really about when you are expressing that love and not looking for direct reciprocity, you are now open to receive it from others who are expressing that love. And it all does ultimately come around that the person with whom you may have been uh, directing that love to may not have been in a receptive mode or in all that at that moment, but that doesn't mean it's not coming around for them either.
Right.
So that's a beautiful energy because we can't be walking around like horse traders and expecting that because not now the mirror neurons kick in, and usually when you smile at someone, they smile back and so forth. But sometimes they don't, or
Right.
you may do a nice thing or what have you, and they may not receive it the way that you're. Well, shouldn't say that. Communication is the reception, not the intent. So they're going to receive it the way ever it is, but that's on them for whatever is going on with them. But it's still our responsibility to modify if we're in a conversation and it's not resonating. And
Mhm.
that's another conversation around communication and leadership. It's not necessarily about being loving, because the most loving thing to do sometimes is, again, let it go.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
that's emotional intelligence, right? So
Yep.
you're first aware of your own response to whatever it is. So you
Hmm.
smiled, they don't. So they received your smile. They didn't give you the response maybe you would have wanted. So you now have a choice. Do you say, okay, and move on? Or do you like mull over it and let it eat away? Like, why didn't they smile at me? Do I look weird? Do they think they're better than me? You know, is my outfit weird or whatever? You know, you can
Hmm.
spiral. Or you just say, okay, and move on. But you reminded me of something. I think that when people hear love, they think very like woo woo, touchy feely, kumbaya. So the corporate version of that, in my opinion, the like professional version of that is value.
Hmm.
If I go into a conversation with someone and I genuinely want to provide value for them, right? It's not me. I want to do something nice for them, show them kindness, give them an idea, help them work through a problem. That is a way that we can show love. We're just not calling it that. We call it value. That's a little bit more of a safer word,
Hmm.
right? If we're talking in professional circles, so that you don't have the stigma of it being touchy feely, but really what it is, it really is. It's showing love to that person.
And the more we have these conversations, I'm hopeful. In many respects, it's so interesting the vacuums and silos we end up attracting, and then we think that everybody must be awesome like we are, right? But it's not always the case.
Right.
That similarly to how corporate attire has shifted to business casual a bit more. Like you don't see as many ties and all of the super flex dressing. Um, and I like to think that similarly, more open dialogue like we're having right now is becoming more normalized, more acceptable. Like we can just be ourselves. And if I want to use the word love, I mean, I tell, I mean, almost all the people, well, I mean, even when I end, like today, I'll even tell you that I love you for who you are and who you aren't. But like even some of my friends and all that, like that, it's like saying goodbye to my wife. It's like, all right, man, love you. Like, yeah, love you too. Like, and it's okay to say that
Yes.
more now than ever before. And ideally, that's raising the vibration, raising the frequency, and that everyone's starting to be more willing to allow some of that otherness in, because the stuffiness of what it used to be is what prevented some of the conversations, which is why, by the way, like you look back, again, I wasn't alive at that time, we're working like in the 40s and 50s, you know, having three martini lunches was normal because
Right.
like it was a way for them to break down and drop and be able to just relax and have that same conversation. I love you, man. Like like that's what they want to say, and it was never okay. Whereas now it's become more socially acceptable and more, a part of our regular conversation to express love, honor, and respect, and not have to tiptoe around, being willing to appreciate somebody.
What's interesting, I find, is I will often reach out to people on LinkedIn, or maybe I met them somewhere and then we'll schedule a time to talk, something like this. And I'm thinking so hard, like, how can I bring something of value to them? How can I show them something that would be helpful to them? But it is often met with a guardrail. Like,
Hmm.
is this legit? Like, where, when is the shoe going to drop? You're going to ask for something from me. I'm like, I
You
got
can't be
nothing.
that nice. You must have an
Yeah,
agenda.
right. And no, I've just, here you go. Because what I have found is those people that you pour yourself into later on will pour themselves into you.
Hmm.
And so it's really just about an investment in other people.
I call that emotional and relational capital that we're investing into our environment, and it's I don't call on it, but it gives me the opportunity to, when in an environment, be open to receiving, like, oh, let me help you out. What can I, there's so many people, and I'm sure you get this too, like, stop, what can I do for you? Like,
Yeah.
how can I help you? Stop helping me. And that's a
I'm like, well,
quality
I don't
problem.
know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When I got something, I'll let you know. It's like
Yeah.
right now, like and it's so funny. Let's pivot a little bit quickly into networking, because now we're talking about relationship building and value adding and overcoming obstacles and navigating, because the rest of the world out there is seeing the same things in the world, and they have their challenges, and they could be going through a divorce, and they could be going through all that stuff, and so it's having empathy and appreciation for that. We met in a networking group where we both said, hey, we want to put ourselves in an environment with like-minded people who say, I want to meet people too.
Mhm.
And there's more upside than downside, and there are also people who are going into these environments as takers, not as givers. It happens. It's just normal. Um, but I know, just speaking for me, the some of the people I've been hanging out with in that space, not just in CEO life, but in others, that we share the same, like, one of the best things we could do is when we meet somebody is go, I know somebody, or here's a resource, or here, and it's
Yeah,
like it lights us up to be able to do that and not expect anything in return.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
how do you
selfishly, it's our own little dopamine hit, right? Like, so I
exactly?
got to help them. Yay, it makes us feel good,
Yeah.
but we don't need them to say, well, I have this person you should meet. I don't need that.
Well, here, the one thing I would shift for us on that, because I same thing, is how much do you love offering that resource, that introduction, and all that? Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's like the best thing.
Absolutely. Yes.
So why
I
would?
call it value linking. I'm always trying to find something that would bring them value and
Hmm.
link them to that. So it's not just share the idea. It's, I'm going to share the idea. Do you want to work through it together?
Right.
Or I know somebody. It's not just I know somebody. Can I send an introduction email to them and to you? So
Right.
right, it's you create the value, but you also have to link it together with an action.
Of course. Oh my gosh, yeah. And where I was leading with this is, just to, throw in the back of your mind, because you shared, well, they want to give something back to me. And I'm like, ah, I don't need it, all that. I challenge you, and me, I have to do this too for myself, is to not deny them the same gift we
Oh, agreed.
experience. So if
Hmm.
we don't let someone give back, we're actually denying them the joy, and it's not the most loving thing to do. But it's funny. I was just talking to a friend the other day, and we have a mutual friend, and it was one of these things like I don't want anything from him, but like I'm reaching out and I'm offering things. He's not even getting back to me, and I don't like I'm not going to work that hard if it's not. He's not even open to it. Like it's also like you're trying to give to somebody. Like no 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 no. You're like all right. Well, at some point I'm going to stop giving just because saying no is different than ghosting. So that's the other thing. So if
Very
someone's
true.
just ghosting, if they're saying no, it's like okay, I'll always do it because we're at least in communication and we're having that thing. So in our last little bit of time, let's share real quickly. What are some of your um, strategies? And I know we talked about it's not gonna be all about strategy, but it's about emotional because we're dealing with people. How do you maximize networking and building relationships and do you have a philosophy around it or do you have a um, ritual or something where when you're going to a new event like I know we talked about intentionality and so forth. So how do you get yourself into a state or how do you show up to a networking, whether it's an event you put on or one you show up to, and are they different?
So it's definitely different because if it's something I'm hosting, then I have a different responsibility. So I
Mm-hmm.
would make sure in that case to greet each person and make sure they're connected to everyone else and kind of act as that host.
Mm-hmm.
Where, whereas I would say it's different when I'm attending an event. Although I will say that I often go in as if it's my event too, because I'm like, hey, it's you. I want to introduce you to that person
Mm-hmm.
after I have some time to get to know everyone. So I would say it's similar, but when I walk into a networking event, we if it's a transactional focus where I know I need to get new business, new leads, new whatever, then what is taught typically is you go until you get five new contacts, three new contacts, whatever the magic number is in your head as a networker, get their cards, set a date and time to talk with them, and now you're done with the event, right? That's what it has historically been taught to do. So you have success at the networking event. I don't agree with that because again, it's based in the transaction. It's based in the gimme. I would rather go and meet as many different people as I can, have as many different interesting conversations, and just be genuinely curious about that person. What? No, you know what it is? It's wildly curious and genuinely interested. That's what it is.
Mm.
So that's what I teach when I teach others about networking is to be wildly curious and genuinely interested. Ask questions. Well, where is this from? And how did you do this? And why did you do that? And that's so incredible. And building that person up through your actual genuine interest. It's not
Mm-hmm.
something that you can fake.
Right.
It's being truly curious, and exploring, and not necessarily checking off some kind of list in your head. Okay, this person can refer me business, and that person can refer me business. Certainly, that's great, but they're not going to refer anything to you if you're not genuine to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I focus on that first. It's about what that other person is doing and how I can uplift them. And then eventually something may come where they can connect me to someone else, or maybe they have a project they want me to work with them on. But first and foremost, it's about showing them that I am wildly curious and genuinely interested.
I love that. Yeah, when I go to networking events, and again, whether I'm hosting it or not, uh, what's one of the typical question, when you meet somebody, what's the first thing they usually ask is, well, what do you do?
Right.
And the first thing I say, if they ask me if they haven't spoken yet, I just reply, well, enough about me. Tell me about you. What are you excited about? What are you? I don't even ask, like, I offer them if they want to tell me what they do, or I usually go, what are you excited about right now? What is bringing you, joy? What are you focused on right now? Because it's not always going to be work, and it also gives me opportunity to kind of go like okay, so what are their needs right now? Are they here for social, are they here for business? And then I'm listening for exactly what you just shared earlier, what their needs are, and then I'm like, hey, do you know so and so?
Mhm.
Let me bring them over, because now what I've done is by listening to everybody, and no one usually they
Right.
don't even get a chance because we're talking. I invite other people into the conversation, and then finally, like, who are you? We don't even know anything about you, which then creates more curiosity, natural curiosity on their side. But the benefit of doing that, I found, is even if they know the person, you're also showing network mastery. So it seems like you know everybody, even though you may have just met them. Like, wow, you know that? Yeah, that's a perfect fit. And it starts to generate that investment into the relationship. And now there's value happening. Like, okay, we just connected. We just, we added the value. And then they go, okay, you're not here to take, you're here to give, which then creates a stronger conversation and then makes it even more powerful. One of the things that I tell everybody is like, man, don't just grab a business card,
Right.
book a meeting. Like, while you're sitting there, like, what are you doing tomorrow? Let's have coffee tomorrow. Let's say, what are you doing on Friday or whatever? And book that meeting right then and there because out of sight, out of mind. And especially if you're hardcore networking, you may leave the event and you may have five, six, 10, business cards, but you don't remember, like
Mhm.
specifically, depending on how many people you've met. But if you've got that appointment booked, you're going to see them and then you don't have to like, worry about whether or not, um, you remember because it's booked. Like
Right.
you've got an
Yeah.
appointment.
I'll tell you a story about the network mastery, as you said. So at the event that you and I met at actually in December, I in one of the breakouts, I'm listening to this gentleman. He's talking all about what he does, and it's in the HR space, and he lives in Nashville. And the whole time I'm thinking, I should introduce him to this other woman that also does HR and recruitment, and maybe they could work together and have some synergy. And so I go and find her and say, I want to introduce you to someone that I just met. And I bring her over and introduce her to him. Come to find out, they're married. They know each other very well.
How
And I
cool.
said, well, great. Then I guess I was on the right
My
track.
work
It is
here
a
is
good
done. There
match.
you go.
Yeah.
That's so brilliant. And and
Mhm.
and that'll happen a lot too when you do that because and again, you can't lose by doing that because that experience right there, like, oh my gosh, like how well do you know us? That you knew we'd go together anyway, so you win there, even though they knew each other. And then if they didn't know each other, the value add is they're like, wow, that's so thoughtful. Like, yeah, like even though there wasn't a fit, maybe if that were to be the case, they understood the intention behind it, and it still holds that same value. And then again, as part of that investment, they're going to want to like just pragmatically, they're going to want to give back anyway.
Mhm.
I mean, it's in our nature. Someone gives us a compliment. What do we usually do? Oh no,
Offer.
you're really cool. Come on, no, you. Right. So it's a great way to inspire that exchange of value, but it's done with authenticity and intention as opposed to like looking for, I did this for you, you did this for me. It's just knowing that it's all going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
It's so true. And it does over and over. I see it happen all the time. I just had a call yesterday with someone. I had connected her to three people, and she reached out to me and said, thank you so much for what you do. You helped me so much with these two projects I was stuck on. I'm so appreciative. And she wants to also offer to connect me with people, and we just
mhm.
haven't figured out what makes sense, but it's there for her. So she now, when she's out and about in the world, if something triggers a training development, org development, maybe leadership, then she can make that connection.
So why don't we end on a little bit of this is what is an ideal referral for you or contact? Like who's your ideal avatar? Like who do you love to serve and bring the most value to? Because it's possible they might be listening at the moment.
Well, ideally, because of the nature of what we do, working with business owners, business leaders, generally someone in the C-suite, that it's ideal to work with that person because ultimately they're going to be the one making the decision within their company to either update training protocols or create new processes of excellence. And so those are things we build. But in addition to that, leadership development opportunities come from that senior leader learning and growing themselves and then wanting to help their team to learn and grow. So someone who owns a business, a company, who or is wanting to scale. So that's a pretty broad audience, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to narrow it down, it would be, mid-size businesses, 50 plus employees, because you don't need a whole training program for three people.
Right.
So 50 plus employees, usually our sweet spot is about 2 to 500 employees. That works great for organizational development and custom training builds that we do. But then on the other hand, with how helping people connect and network, entrepreneurs, business owners, business leaders. I can help bring value to them too. So
Love it.
quite the broad
Yeah.
stroke.
So the last two questions. The first one is, what is your superpower?
So it's funny that we've been talking about networking because I really feel like that is a superpower that I
Mhm.
have. I feel very comfortable doing that. And it comes from what I've shared already. But if I were to share a different one, it would be facilitating. I absolutely love teaching and helping others learn in a in person, sometimes virtual, but really in that in person setting. And that's because of the approach that I take, which is based on this book called Training from the Back of the Room. So I am not one that is a lecturer. I am one that's pulling ideas out of people through exercises, activities, conversation, presentation. And I absolutely love that. And I feed off of that energy and give that back to my audience.
Beautiful. And the last, although somewhat trite question, it's still a powerful one. Knowing what you know now, if you were to go back in life and communicate to a young Amber, knowing that, of course, you know, didn't do anything different and all that good stuff and all the things, the pains
Yeah.
and issues that we've had made us who we are, and that's all true. And if there was a bit of wisdom, advice, support, loving statement, what would you tell young Amber, knowing what you know now, as she faced the crazy, wild, wacky world ahead of her?
So I would say, and it's something I tell myself even now, is stop caring about what other people think of you and
Mhm.
just be you. Be authentically yourself, bravely who you are, and forge forward with what inspires you and brings you joy and love without this cloud of worry of what others
Mhm.
will think. That would
Beautiful.
absolutely be the advice and the one I give myself and remind myself even now.
Well, I'll quote Dr. Seuss on that one, which I've used often, is be who you are and feel what you feel, because those who mind do not matter, and those who matter do not mind. Oh, lost you. So it's I love Dr. Seuss.
I love that.
Uh,
That's a great quote.
so with that being said, anyone, how can people get in touch with you? They're wanting to learn more. They're wanting to find out about your offerings around training, development, etc., and beyond, about maybe even networking. Maybe you're hosting an event. Who knows? I know you do.
Yeah.
How would one get in touch with you?
So the easiest way is either on LinkedIn, Amber R. Carlson is what I'm listed as there, or emailing me at amber at, and then my company name, archwaylearningsolutions.com, visiting that website, or my book series website, which is igniteyourlegacyseries.com. So there's a lot of different avenues to find me.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your incredible wisdom and energy and your most valuable asset, your time. And with that being said, I love you for who you are and who you aren't. Any final words?
I love you for who you are and who you aren't as well, Doug.
Thank you so much. God bless.